we're going to go ahead and get started with Introduction to ITERS. This is Jackie Scott speaking, the Hub Manager. You can't see me if you are joining online, but I just wanted to let you know that I realize the slides are backwards for your view, which is why all of the materials were sent to you yesterday. Anyone who registered online got all of the materials yesterday, so you'll want to reference those slides as Heidi moves through, and I'm sure she'll read some of the titles so that you know where we're at in the process. If you're reviewing this training after the fact, so you're reviewing the recording of this training, we will have the materials available for you, so you'll want to have the PowerPoint before you begin viewing this training. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Heidi. Heidi Gonzalez. She is one of our mentor coaches for QRIS, and she is an assessor in ITERS. Is that right?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, so she's going to take it away.
All right, welcome everybody for showing up and being online with me. This is the introduction to ITERS. So it's kind of a brief overview of what ITERS is about and what we're looking for as trainers or as assessors. So my background, I've been in early childhood, probably date myself here, about 35 years. I know, right? Jackie gave a face. Not really working with infants and toddlers other than my own children. And when I did family child care years ago, I also had some infants at that time. But my main emphasis in my career has been around pre-K level. So, and I think we'll just introduce those of you that are in the room and tell a little bit about your background, where you're from and where you're working.
I'm Cheyenne. I work at Early Foundation Children's Academy.
Okay.
Thank you. And then I'll just go ahead and introduce who we have here online. It looks like we have Lassen County Office. I think there are a couple participants joining us virtually from Lassen. We have Fady in Glenn County and Liz Welch in Plymouth. So thanks for tuning in.
Welcome, ladies.
Yeah, and so there's just the few of you online, so go ahead and send in all of your questions and I'll try to make sure I get to all of them. I originally had it in view only mode, but now because fewer participants, I can manage your questions a little bit easier. So.
And there's not that many in the
Right.
room, so
Yes.
that'll help. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the definitions that you hear when you're meeting with a mentor or with an assessor, and what some of those terms mean to you when you're in the classroom and you're thinking about your materials and your what's available to the babies and the toddlers. So the first one is accessible, and if you're a program that's 8 hours or more, you have to provide the materials for the children to have the choice of those materials for at least an hour per day. If the children can reach and are allowed to use the toys, the materials, the furniture, and the equipment during the day, then that would be considered accessible as well. And toys that are easy for children to reach would be accessible. If a child were to get a little container off the shelf and they were not easily able to get the lid off, then that would be considered not accessible. If an adult had to come over and help them take that lid off, then that's considered not accessible. So when you're putting your materials on the shelves, you want to think ahead about how you're putting them on the shelf so that it's easy for them to get the materials out of the container. So maybe little baskets. If it's something that you don't want an infant to get a hold of, put them up a little bit higher where an infant can't get to them. So. And then for a non-mobile infant, like the little one in the picture on the screen, the materials have to be brought to the infant. And periodically throughout the day, you would want to bring over different choices of materials so that they don't have the same thing around them all day long or for the period of time that they're laying on the blanket. Okay, another term that we hear a lot in the tool is called much of the day. And just like substantial portion of the day for ITERS, it's very similar. Much of the day refers to the time of materials that are accessible to the children, meaning most of the time that children are awake is the amount of time that they would have accessible materials for them. If children are prevented from using the materials for a long period of time, like if they have lengthy routines, if they're being kept in groups for long periods of time, or if they're being kept in an area where they're not able to get to materials, like if they're kept in a high chair or a playpen, then that would be considered not much of the day. For a non-mobile child, giving access to only limited number of toys, that would not be considered much of the day. And if the all required toys for a non-mobile infant do not have access, they don't have to have access to them at all times, just during different parts of the day. Okay, some and many are two of the other terms that we'll use as we're going through the tool. Some denotes the presence of at least one item unless it's stated differently in the tool. And when you're going through the tool at the 3 level, some can mean maybe one item, and then it moves on over to the 5 level. Some can typically mean more than one. And it usually will state that in the tool, exactly what the number is. Many requires that children do not have to wait for long periods to use an item, and it also denotes the frequency that an item is accessible. It's important for, as I just said, for you to look in your notes in your book to make sure you understand the difference between some and many, if they're requiring more than just a couple of items or if they require more. Okay, hand washing. Oh, where's my video?
You may have to click the link on your. Here.
It's not even popping up on that. That's weird. Oh, there it is.
This one?
Mm-hmm. Should, when it's in now it's this one. Oh, there we go.
I might. Let's see. Since full screen's unavailable.
You have to go into the video screen mode, into the video slideshow. Sorry.
There we go. Cool.
Okay, so we're going to watch a video on hand washing and what that looks like when you're with your infants and your toddlers. This is mainly for the older children. Infants, obviously, you have to hold them and help them with the hand washing procedure. Can you turn it up a little bit?
Sure. Sorry, online folks, I know there's some words in there that you're not going to be able to read, but I can provide you the link after so you can also access that after the training. Maybe you want to read that out loud, Heidi? Okay, Heidi's going to go over what this video just showed us in the room. Who knew there were so many steps to hand washing? I did not.
Right. So one thing to note is that both with the ITERS, the ITERS, and the FECRS tool, those steps in that procedure is all the same. It doesn't vary across from one tool to the other. So, and I did have handouts to explain those steps, and we also have a diagram that shows the photographs of those steps that you can print and laminate to put in your children's bathroom so that they can see those steps. And as an assessor, when I go in and I'm doing an observation and I'm looking for those steps to be followed, at the 3 level, I'm not looking for 100% across the board, perfect. I'm looking for at least 75% of the time children are doing those steps and those procedures. And the provider or the teacher of the class can actually be telling the children those steps. So the children don't have to necessarily know those steps by heart yet. They can be being told that. And as long as they're being walked through the process, that would count for a score.
So can you tell us that for those folks, that video was, unless you can read backwards really quickly and really efficiently, they don't know what those are. So can you just recap what the steps were?
The steps, absolutely. The first thing you're going to do is children need to get their hands wet. If they have a foam soap available, the hands don't have to be wet first, so that would eliminate that piece of the process. The reason they get their hands wet first is so that they're going to get the soap on their hands second, and that would create bubbles as they're rubbing their hands together. If they've got the foam soap, you don't have to wet your hands first because it's already foamy and bubbly, and so that kind of eliminates that step. The second step would be for them to, as they're rubbing their hands together, that they're taking the time to get between their fingers, the backs of their hands, their wrists, the palms of their hands. I always tell children, make sure you scrub the germs on the palms of your hands with your fingernails because, children get digging in dirt and things and they get dirt on their end of their fingernails too. So germs are hiding there as well. And then the next process is to use your hands under the water. That whole piece of step right there should take 20 seconds. The alphabet song, singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, those kinds of songs will help that counting process. I've heard teachers use happy birthday, but then, if a child's family doesn't celebrate birthdays, that connotates, that you're doing something in the classroom that's inappropriate for them. So happy birthday is not a good song, even though it does count for the same amount of time as Twinkle Twinkle or something like that. But that's important to remember. And then the third step then at that point would be to get a paper towel, dry your hands thoroughly, and then the next step would be to turn it off with the paper towel, turn the faucet off. If there's a line of children and they're waiting their turn, the water doesn't have to be turned off between each child. It could be left running until the last child. So, in a lot of classrooms that I've been in, teachers actually teach the children not to turn the water off, and that the teacher actually does that step. So that kind of helps eliminate that step as well. So there's ways to kind of cut corners, make it less difficult. I've heard teachers say that's a lot of steps. There's no way my kids are going to learn that. And I've been in classrooms where they actually follow those steps to the T, and those kids are doing a 100% job across the board. So it is possible, but it takes some time and practice on the teacher's parts to be just consistent in helping them learn that process. With infants, you obviously, those steps, an infant can't do those steps by themselves. So you have to hold the infant, you have to rub their hands with your hands and the soap with them, and do that process with them, but you're actually doing it for them. When you're diapering, you want to wipe the child's hands with a wet wipe before you take them over to the sink to wash, because if they touch their body parts and then you carry them over and out of touching you, or they might grab a toy or something on their way over, then they're going to contaminate. So you always want to wipe their hands first with a little wet wipe so that you at least eliminate some of the germs before you take them to the sink to wash. Okay. Any questions yet? No? Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about display in the classroom. This is kind of a tough one sometimes for some environments. And display is the things that you see on the walls that are there that either the children have made or they're pictures that you're putting up on your walls to help meet needs of maybe family members' pictures and their pictures so that they can see their families and things during the day. It can be mobiles hanging above for infants to see. Anything that is at the adult's shoulder height or lower is considered appropriate. I like to tell people, take your ceiling to your floor and draw a line at the midpoint, and that would be what would be appropriate. Obviously, toddlers are smaller than preschool age children, so that line might get lowered a tiny bit because you want them to be able to see the pictures and things easily. If a picture has just small little designs on it and details on it, it's harder for a child to pick out those details and be able to talk about the picture other than if they're big. So if the items in the picture, like the example in the little infant is pointing to a mommy and a little baby, those are large detailed pictures. And so it could be a little bit higher and the infant could still see it easily. But if the details are smaller, then you want to lower it so it's easier for them to depict and be able to see. For infants, mobiles and colorful hanging objects, as an observer, when I go to an environment, I'm going to look for at least 2 examples like that. So it may be over their play area where they're playing and they're on the floor playing. That might be an area I would look for it. Or it could be over their crib, as long as it's not attached to the crib where they can pull it down, because that becomes a safety issue. So it has to be hanging above and not attached to anything that they can get a hold of. Many colorful and simple pictures, posters, photographs displayed where children can easily see them and within reach. So I have a lot of teachers say, well, if I put things within reach, they're going to tear them down. Putting them behind a plexiglass window like that one in the display picture there is one way to solve that issue. Also, I've seen family child care providers who have infants typically will go get the large poster frames. Walmart carries them for about $10, and they'll put several pictures, artwork pictures in one of those and display it on the wall low down where children can get to them and touch them and talk about their pictures that they've made. Toddler artwork needs to be displayed, and a toddler is considered any child over 12 months. And the staff should talk about the display with the children. So as an observer, I'm going to look for at least one example of that while I'm observing. And a way that you might talk to them is to just, mention the colors that are in the picture, or talk about the people that are in the picture, or if it's, a picture of the family, you might mention the family. And so maybe putting some of those photos around the diapering table would be a place that you could put some so that you'd have that conversation while you're diapering them. And then photos of the child's family, include pets in that. And for the photos of the child, the family, or pets, I'm going to look for at least 2 examples of that. And sometimes that can be difficult. Maybe the environment that the children are housed in is very small. And so one way to help with that is to maybe put some photos in an album and put it in your little library area so they can get a hold of that and look at it when they choose to. It doesn't have to be displayed on a wall or anything like that. I have an example here where a classroom did a tree, and on that tree they put pictures of the children as infants on the tree. It was a toddler classroom, and so they put pictures of them as infants on there. And then this other photo is a picture of a teacher putting artwork in a glass frame, and they're up a little bit higher. I would use plexiglass in the classroom rather than glass, but I would put the pictures lower if it wasn't glass. But that way if you get those frames with the hinges on the side, you can open them up easily and change the artwork out easily from time to time. Okay. So we talked a little bit about putting pictures around the diapering table so that you can have conversations easily with the children as you're diapering them. Language with children is an important part of their learning and their development. And the more conversations they hear, the more quicker they're going to gain language and understand language and be able to use language. And it also is associated with their early reading. So we want to make sure we're constantly talking. And I've been in classrooms where I've done observations and I see them have an infant or a toddler up on the changing table, and there's really no conversation going on with that child that they're changing. They're busy talking to maybe other children in the classroom, but that child that they're working with, they're kind of just going through the motions of getting the job done. And that's a really a great time for you to have some really great one-on-one time with them, and to be able to have that time that's warm and gives them a chance to feel comforted and loved and cared for. So with language, we want to hear the staff talking with children during both play and routines. We want to hear talk that's meaningful and related to the children's experiences. And what that means is that, you're talking about things that they're familiar with. So maybe in the morning after mommy or daddy dropped them off, and maybe they're standing near the window, or you're holding them and letting them look out the window to see their parents drive away. You're talking about, mommy or daddy, or the car they're driving, or what did they see on their way to school? And did you see any trees? Or is it windy outside or rainy outside? So those are things that the child's familiar with at that time of the day. And so you want to talk about things that are very familiar with them. We want to hear lots of descriptive, simple wording that's used. So descriptive wording would be things like if the child's playing with a car, or maybe they pushed the car and it went across the room, and you say, go get that car. That's not descriptive. So you might say, go get the rolling truck that's blue, just rolled across the room, and ask them to get it. So you're using some descriptive language. You're describing what the truck's doing, and you're describing the color of the truck. Verbal communication that's personalized, using their names, having some eye contact with them as you're talking with them. Things that are familiar become personalized. So if you're talking about daddy's driving away in his white car, so that's familiar to them and it's personalized because it's their car and it's daddy's and he's driving away. And then verbal play with children is used. So playing, finger plays and songs, things that you're playing with the language with them. You're doing some singing and songs and Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, Patty Cake, those kinds of things where you're interacting with them more actively than just talking. Okay. So we'll move on now to the activity areas that when an assessor comes into your room, they're looking for specific areas of your room to have specific criteria within that area so that you can get a good score. And a good score would be anything to meet at the 5 level or above. So for books, at the 5 level, we're looking for at least 12 appropriate infant and toddler books. And appropriate would mean a developmental age appropriate. It also looks at, there's a specific criteria of books that is not appropriate because it contains some violence in it. Some of the nursery rhymes and the fairy tale books that we all grew up with, we loved. We obviously weren't harmed by those. We're still functioning as normal adults, but there's connotations within them that a child could be frightened or scared of. And so we want to make sure that if we're reading those fairy tales that we're talking about, bears, and that bears can't walk and talk, and they don't have a house to live in, and they don't have beds and furniture and that kind of thing. So we're talking about those things. Even though infants and toddlers are small and might not understand everything you're trying to tell them, you're at least giving some information to them to help them learn about. 5.2, we're looking for a wide selection of books to be accessible. So we don't want to see all books about, with just one picture and a word in it, like a ball, it's labeling a ball, or it's a car, or it's all books about animals. We want to see a large variety of books. And that almost all of the books are in good repair. So if, obviously, infants and toddlers are a little bit more, aggressive with books, and they don't take as good of care of books, and if they don't understand that books can be torn easily. And it's good to have some paper books in there as well as the cardboard books. And I know a lot of teachers and staff say, we're not putting paper books in our toddler room. But, how else are they going to learn so that when they go to the preschool classroom, they already know how to somewhat take care of a book if they're not given that opportunity. So having a few books in that. And as an assessor, I'm going to look to see, if there's, say, 5 books that are paper, and out of those 5 books, how many of them are terribly damaged? And by terribly damaged, I'm thinking of things that are like, they're so torn that a child can't turn the page, or they're so torn they can't read the words or see the picture very well anymore. And so that's what I would be looking for. And I'm going to look for about 75% of the books to not be damaged in that way. At the 5.3 level, the staff read books daily with individuals or small groups. And that's just it's not a specific gathering where I've gathered all the toddlers together, or I'm holding the infant, and have a couple infants laying around me and I'm reading with them, because now it's a planned activity. That's not the time, what I'm referring to at the 5 level. I'm thinking more of spontaneous. The child's brought a book over to me and I'm going to just sit and read. It doesn't mean you have to read front to back in order to get credit, but you're having some kind of interaction with the child in a book. I'm going to look for that at least one time during my observation. And then at the 5.4 level, we're looking for book time to be warm and interactive. So you're including that child in your reading. So it might be, can you find the doggy? Or do you see the bear? Or, holding them and cuddling them and laughing with them and having some fun with them. And we're going to look for that to be a meaningful time as well. So it's not a time where you're just going through the motions and you're reading it and there's no conversation around the book and you're just reading the words and you turn the page and you read the words and you turn the page. We're looking for it to be interactive and to be fun. And then we move to the 7 level. You get past all of those criteria, you get to move to the 7 level. And the 7 level, we're looking for book area to be set up for toddlers to use independently. So the picture right here in the upper screen shows a little guy sitting on a little chair, and there's some little railing shelves above him with just a few books. That would be considered that he could walk over there, take a book off the shelf and sit down in that little chair, and he was able to do that without any interaction from an adult. That would be considered independent. And then at the 7.2 level, we're looking for the staff to be involved periodically throughout the day. So again, same as the 5 level, that you're getting a book or a child's bringing you a book and you're having that book time together. We're going to look for that at least 2 times during the day. And at the 7.3 level, we're looking for books to be added or changed to maintain interest. So that wouldn't be something I would be able to observe as an assessor. So that would be a question I would ask the staff after I was done observing. How often do you change your books out? And it should be at least monthly, if not more often. So, any questions? Okay, so we'll talk about fine motor. Fine motor are things that children do with their fingers and their hands that require more specific movement other than gripping with fists. It's more defined. So at the 5 level, we're looking for mini and varied. Remember, we talked about mini could change depending on what the criteria is. And for fine motor, for infants, we're looking for at least 10 items. And for toddlers, we're looking for at least 15 items. And we're going to talk a little bit about what types of items those might be. And then at 5.2, we're going to look for them being well organized. So that the bucket of cars are all together, or the bucket of small table blocks are all together, or the bucket of manipulatives are all together. Come in. And then at the 7 level, we're looking for the rotation of materials at least monthly. Again, that would be a question that as an observer and as the assessor, I would ask that question when I was done with the assessment. And then 7.2, we would look to see that the materials are on different levels of difficulty and that they're accessible. And what that means is that you may have 2 different types of puzzles. Maybe both puzzles have knobs on them, but maybe one, like the picture of the little girl, maybe those knobs are tiny. And maybe the other puzzle has larger knobs for the child who's not quite ready to do that pincer grasp yet. And we're going to look for at least 2 examples of that. So let's talk about what kinds of materials you might provide. So infants, you might provide things like rattles and grasping toys, busy boxes, nesting cups, textured toys, containers that you can fill and dump. anything that an infant can play with and manipulate that's not too small, because they obviously are still mouthing things. So you want it to be at least 2 inches big so that it's not something they can throw into their mouth and get choke on. And then toddlers, we're looking for things like shape sorter games, large stringing beads, knobbed puzzles, stacking rings, chunky crayons, big pegs with pegboards, and medium to large interlocking blocks. So ITERS is a little bit different in the fact that ITERS is looking for a very specific number of each type of area, and for ITERS that's not the case. We're just looking for a total number of items for infants, 5 items for infants, 10 for toddlers. But it doesn't have to be specific in any category. Okay. So art, and a lot of staff say, okay, we're not doing art with our toddlers, and they're just really adamant about it. There are some things you can do to provide art and have a great experience for those toddlers, so that when they do go and they're getting a little older and they go to the preschool level, they've got some experiences under their belt, and it's not so overwhelming and new to them that they're lost and afraid to touch it or those kinds of things. Art would not be offered to an infant that's under 12 months. That is absolutely a no. So at the 5 level, we're looking for younger toddlers. 12 to 23 months would be considered a younger toddler, to be offered art at least 3 times per week. And then for older toddlers between the ages of 24 to 30 months, that they're being offered art every day. And what does art look like for these toddlers? It could be anything from painting to putting a piece of construction paper shapes on a sticky paper, on a piece of contact paper. It could be playing with Play-Doh. It could be paint, and you could use large objects to paint with. So there's lots of different, it could be just coloring with crayons, big chunky crayons. You obviously don't want to use the tiny ones, even though it's really good to start them with that pincer grasp, but it can be considered a choking hazard. Marker pens, a lot of teachers will say, well, can we do marker pens that are, waterproof, or the kind that you can erase and wipe off? And you can, yes, but you want to make sure that the caps are enclosed in something so that they can't take the cap and have it running around and it falls on the floor, because it is a choking hazard. So you would get marked down in the safety area for that. At the 5.2 level, we're looking for individual expression to be encouraged. Individual expression means that the child can choose the materials he wants to use, and that he can do whatever he would like to do with those materials. So it's not that you're going to make an Easter bunny. So we're close to Easter, so I'm thinking Easter in my brain. So you're not providing a circle and some oval shapes, and you're saying that those oval shapes go up here because those are the ears, and here's your eyes, and they go over here, and you're not telling them where it goes or showing them or moving it around after they've put it on because it's in the wrong place. Those are called parent pleasers, and we don't want to see that because it's about the process, not the product. So, and then we're looking for the expectations based on the child's ability. So if the child doesn't have any kind of motor control yet, and they're not able to hold like this little guy with the Q-tips, if your child's not able to do that yet, don't offer that activity to them. That's a little more advanced. Give them, even if they're in that 24 to 30 month range, and they should be able to do that at this point, they may not be developmentally ready for that yet. So give them something that's a little bit larger, like, for example, the picture in the middle where the guy has a great big sponge to manipulate. So base what you're offering on their ability. And not asked to copy an example, so you're not going to put out your example and then give them pieces and expect them to do that. And no dittos or color books at this age at all. At the 5.4 level, we're looking for staff to facilitate appropriate use of materials. So you can see in all 3 pictures that staff person has taped the paper to the table so that it won't move around. Because there's nothing more frustrating if you've ever watched a toddler trying to color and that paper is moving back and forth with the crayon because their arm is moving too at that age. They don't color like this yet, they color like this. And as they're doing that, that paper starts scattering across the table. Or painting, they're using all of their body to paint. They're not just using their fingers. So make sure that you're facilitating their art project so that it's appropriate for them. Question?
Okay, so you said anything under the 12 months, it's not supposed to do art at all. So does that mean like, you know, when they paint their hands and they do like, they're not supposed to do anything like that? Or like finger painting, when they're using like finger paint, they're not supposed to do anything?
Yeah, because they're still so oral that they say not to do art with under 12 months.
But so it's like the staff assisted, like the handprints on the paper, they can't do either.
I mean, I don't think that they say you can't do it. Leslie, you got an opinion on that?
I don't think it's a required. It's not a required
Right.
area.
I know at the one level it says mark off if they do art with a child that's 12 months or under. So you would get marked down for it even if you're assisting. But I mean, I wouldn't say don't do art with your child. You know, just don't do it on the day we're assessing.
But if you come into the classroom and it's on the walls,
I don't know who did that. It could be an older child that just doesn't have as much development, or I mean, I don't know the children when I go in there.
Okay, but for example, like we have an infant room and a toddler room, they're completely broken up.
Right.
So by a year. So if you were to go into the infant room, you would know that it wasn't a child that was over 12 months.
Right.
So would you get like docked down if you came into art in the infant room and you know that they're under 12 months?
I would see it happening that day. Right. I would want to.
But not if it was just on the walls.
Yeah, if it was just on the walls. I mean, it could have been brought in from another room for display purposes. Who knows?
Okay.
You know, and I'm not gonna get that detailed.
Okay. Good question.
Yeah. Any other questions?
No.
Okay, so at the 7 level, we're looking for a variety of materials to be introduced as children are ready. Younger toddlers would need to have at least 3 different types of art materials offered during the week, like crayons, watercolor markers, or finger paints. And you can see, here's an example of the markers. They're in a little bowl with plaster of Paris around the lid, so the lid can't be removed. Or Lakeshore carries and I think Discount School, most of the supply companies have the blocks of wood with the holes drilled and you stick your, caps in there. So that's a good way to keep the lid from becoming a choking hazard. Older toddlers would need to have access to more than 3 different kinds of materials on a weekly basis. And those could be things like Play-Doh added or different sizes and types of brushes, those kinds of things. And then at the 7.2 level, we're looking for access to materials based on ability. So we would want to really look at that area to make sure that if the child is a little bit older, that they have more access to different types of materials for their level. And because of that, you might want to put some things up a little bit higher where a child can get to them if they're, a little bit older, but not so much so for the littler ones. Okay, so we're going to look at this picture here and talk about whether it's individualized. And this, for those of you online, is a picture of a little toddler between the ages of 12 months and 30 months. And she is using some dauber paints to paint on the piece of paper. And they have it secured on a clipboard, so it's not moving around. They're outside in the grass. And she's using red, but looks like she's used some yellow and some green. And there's a second clipboard in the background that has just some green and some red, and there's a child sitting there, looks like. So would this be considered individualized? Any thoughts? It would, because even though the toddlers might all use the same colors of daubers, they're able to use those daubers on the paper however they would like. No one's telling them they have to paint a specific thing or just make dots with it. They're obviously allowed to do whatever they want to, and they can choose the colors. Okay, and here we have in this picture, a picture of 4 butterflies. It looks like fold over art, and it looks like there's choices of different colors, blue, yellow, and red, maybe some green, hard to tell. So would this be considered individualized?
No.
No, because even though the children might be allowed to choose the colors and they might get to choose where they put it on the butterfly before this other side is folded over, it's not individualized because the object is that they're going to all make butterflies. So. Okay, so music and movement. At the 5 level, we're looking for many pleasant sounding musical toys and or instruments on a daily basis to be accessible and for much of the day. So meaning much of the day, remember, means that any time that they're awake. And non-mobile babies have to have opportunity to those instruments as well. So they might not have access to every single type of item that an older child would, but they would have some access to different materials that make noise. And then at the 5-2 level, we're looking for the staff to informally chant or sing. Could be finger plays or songs, whichever. And we're going to look at least one time during our observation for something like that. And then at the 5.3 level, in addition to singing, we're looking for staff to provide other types of musical experiences. So they might bring out a larger instrument that just the adult would use, but they're letting the children hear it and see it and touch it. Or it could be a tape or a CD player that's used so that they can hear other kinds of music throughout the day other than just an instrument. And it could be that music's played during nap time, or maybe during, as they're first arriving, there's some soft music playing. So we're going to look for at least one time during our observation for an example of that. And then at the 5.4 level, we're looking for recorded music that's used for a limited time. So let's say, for example, a toddler comes over to you and says, "Baa Baa Black Sheep," and they want to hear the song "Baa Baa Black Sheep." So you turn on the CD player, and it's different nursery rhymes and lullabies that children like to hear. And it's playing, and the child's dancing or clapping to it, and you're interacting with them a little bit. And then that child loses some interest, and he goes off to do something different, but you leave the CD player on. At that point in time, I'm going to be looking at my watch and saying, okay, time starts. And I'm going to be watching to see and listen for how long is that music playing with no one interacting with it. If it's on for at least 20 minutes with no interaction from the adults or a child, then you'll be marked down at that level. So if at, say, 10 minutes in to my timing, another child comes over, or the same child comes over, or the provider, the staff member comes over and starts clapping to it, and some children start coming over and wanting, my time stops. So maybe I have 10 minutes in and I stop, and then let's say they do that for 2 or 3 minutes, and then they wander away and it's still playing, my time starts again. So that's how I would track that and keep track. There's lots of counting and time and ITERS for me to keep track of.
So if you were to just shut it off, after it was done, then it would just be done and you wouldn't have to time it?
Right. So the idea is if it's just on and just playing for at least 20 minutes or more, and there's no interaction going on with it, then there's no purpose to its playing. So it's just another noise in the room. And the idea is to alleviate some of that excess noise that doesn't need to take place if there's no interaction. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, at the 7 level, we're looking for musical toys to be rotated at least 2 times a month to provide different types of experiences with instruments. And obviously that's not something I would see as an assessor, so that would be one of those questions I would ask during the interview process. How often do you change your musical instruments out? So good reason not to put everything that you have out at the same time. There doesn't need to be a large amount of things out at one time. So, having a couple things out for each age group is plenty. And then at the 7.2 level, we're looking for different types of music. So cultural and popular music, music in other languages so they can hear, and cultural music that has different kinds of characteristics to it. There's certain kinds of cultures that have different instruments that we typically don't hear those sounds in our culture. So having those kinds of musical CDs available so they can hear it is great. And then 7.3, we're looking for staff to encourage children to be involved with the music, to clap and to dance and to sing. Okay, any questions?
Chat box is clear online, but I got my eye on it. If anyone has a question, feel free to type in the chat box.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll move on to blocks. Blocks for toddlers and infants follows along similar guidelines as ITERS as far as the types of blocks, but then there are some things that are a little bit different, so there's not as many requirements. 5.1, we're looking for 2 different types of blocks or sets of blocks with at least 10 or more blocks in a set. And a block for an infant or toddler is 2 by 2. It doesn't have to be a smooth block, where ITERS requires the blocks to be smooth and not have ridges or like the alphabet blocks. These can have those types of blocks included. The blocks have to be 2 by 2 in size, and they have to be available for much of the day. So again, as when the child is awake. 5.2, the blocks and accessories are stored by type, and accessories are things like vehicles, people, and animals. And then 5.3, the space is used for toddlers. Block play is out of traffic, so meaning it's kind of tucked off to the corner so that as other toddlers are running across the room, they're not tripping over blocks and knocking block structures down that could be being built. And that they're out of the traffic, and it has a steady surface on for them to build on. So it's not a surface that's wibbly and wobbly. It's a solid surface. Did you have a question?
Oh, I got it. It's okay.
Okay.
It was an ITERS question, but
Oh,
it
okay.
just like made me
Perfect.
question all.
No problem. Okay, and then at the 7 level, we're looking for 3 different types of blocks with 10 or more in each set, and that they're accessible for much of the day. And 7.2, that there's a variety of accessories. So transportation, animals, and people are your accessories. So we're looking for a variety, meaning transportation might have things like airplanes and trucks and cars and buses rather than just cars. Or people, but there's might be career people, you know, community helper type people, or different types of cultural people, different skin colors and that kind of thing. And then animals, it could be, you know, farm animals or ocean or jungle, that kind of thing. So we're looking for different types of things in each of those categories with a total of at least 15, not 15 in each area, but a total of 15. And then 7.3, we're looking for the staff to be involved in their play. It doesn't have to be very involved. It can be just simple play. And we're going to look for that to happen at least 1 time during our observation. It doesn't have to be for a lengthy time either. Just, you know, they've gone over and you're building with the blocks. Oh no, it fell over. Let me help you. And you're helping them. And then maybe you get up and you move to another group of children doing something different. But you've gotten yourself involved, or you've talked to them about the structure that they're trying to stack. You're stacking 3 blocks, that kind of thing. Okay, so we'll move to dramatic play. And dramatic play for toddlers looks completely different than it does for preschoolers, obviously, because they're still learning how to pretend. Things are still very real to them. They don't know how to think beyond into that fantasy piece as easily. So it looks different. So at the 3 level, and I threw a 3 in here because you can't get past this one if you don't have this. 2 or more dolls have to be accessible, and 2 or more soft animals have to be accessible. And that's, you know, toddlers love to carry little dolls and little animals around with them, you know, and they are very capable of pretending to feed a baby or pretending to feed an animal. But in their play, their pretend is real. So
That's
Jackie.
2 or more per child, or is that for
It's,
your whole program?
it's 2 or more per program.
Okay.
Yeah. So sometimes I've been in classrooms where they have 1 doll and might have several stuffed animals, but they only have 1 doll. Or they might have 3 or 4 baby dolls, but only, you know, 1 stuffed animal. So having a nice balance there. Classroom sizes are smaller, so they don't have to have as many materials. Makes it nice. Yes.
So with that, so the infants, they still need the library book part. And with
Infants
that,
don't have to have a specified area for the books, just toddlers. Toddlers
Okay.
have to be able to have a specific area that they know they can go over and get a book, where infants don't have to have that.
okay, so there doesn't have to be like a shelf or
No.
But okay, so but for anyways, but usually like in the same area, you know, they have like their stuffies or their letters
Right.
that they have to have a certain amount. Do
Not
infants need a certain? Because I thought it was like 25
Now, ITERS does require a specific number, but ITERS does not.
So it's just two, at least two
At
dolls in
the
the
three
whole
level.
classroom.
At the 3 level, yeah. And then at the 5 level, we're looking for many and varied age-appropriate dramatic play materials to be accessible daily. And for infants, that would be 1 from each category, and we'll talk about what those categories are in a couple of minutes. For toddlers, it's 2 examples from each category. And then at the 5.2 level, we're looking for props that represent children's everyday life experiences. So like a telephone or a hairbrush or, things that are familiar to them, plastic fruits and vegetables, things that they would know about. At the 5.3 level, we're looking for the materials to be organized by type. So all the fruits and vegetables are in a container. All of the cars are in a container, that kind of thing. 5.4, we're looking for some child-sized play furniture for toddlers. So it could be, a little couch or a little table and chairs, something like that. Questions? Okay, so the categories for dramatic play for infants, where you need to see at least 1 item from each of these categories. Dolls is a category, so we want to see at least 1 doll. Soft animals, we want to see at least 1. Pots and pans, at least 1. And a toy telephone, at least 1. So you want to see at least 1 of each of those. For toddlers, we want to see 2 examples in each category. So it would be 2 pieces of dress-up clothes. So it could be some shoes and a hat. Or it could be, you don't want your toddler dress-up clothes to be so difficult they can't, but you want them to be able to start putting things on for themselves. So it might be a little shawl that they wrap around themselves. Or it might be a cape or something like that, but things that are simple for them. Child-sized house furniture. So now you might include a little sink and a refrigerator, something like that. Cooking and eating equipment. So you might have a cup and a plate. I would probably stay away at this point from the silverware because that really does entail let's put it in our mouth. So I would keep away from those as much as possible. Play foods, toy telephones, dolls, doll furnishings. So maybe include a high chair or a little cradle for them to put the doll in. Soft animals and small buildings with accessories. So you might have a farm with the animals or an airport with the airplanes, that kind of thing. So we want to see 2 in each of those areas. Questions? Okay, at the 7 level, we're going to look for some diversity, and we want to see at least 2 examples. And diversity can be anywhere from foods to clothing items to pictures in the dramatic play area of a family eating a certain kind of food, things like that. And then 7.2, we're looking for active outdoor dramatic play. So for toddlers, that looks way different than it does for a preschooler. And so it could be just a really large truck where they can put some sticks in it to transport to the sandbox, or could have some little bit larger people to put in the truck to transport over, and pretend, or some apples, plastic apples, where they can pretend they're at the orchard collecting apples. And then at the 3 level, we're looking for staff to pretend play, and that's to help the child begin to learn. So if you had apples outside with a big truck, you might pretend that you're, in the fall, that you're going to the farm to collect the apples and that kind of thing, and start getting them to think and beyond their immediate surroundings. And we would look for at least 1 example for that area as we were observing. So, questions?
I'll let you know for sure.
Okay. So sand and water. At the 5 level, we're looking for sand or water to be provided at least once weekly, and that can be indoors or outdoors. It doesn't have to be just indoors or just outdoors.
With infants too?
Infants, it doesn't require infants to have sand or water, no, because they're oral.
That's what I was.
Yeah, so this is just toddlers. At the 5.2 level, we're looking for a variety of accessories. Those accessories could be things like shovels and buckets and cups. And we're looking for different transparencies. Toddlers, we want them to be able to see what's inside that bucket from the outside too, so we can begin to talk about, is it full or empty? Because when you put sand into a bucket for a toddler, They don't understand it's that full and empty concept yet, but if you can look on the outside and say, oh, look, here it is the bottom and here's the top, and now it's almost full. And so you can talk about that a little bit easier because they don't understand quantity yet or that concept yet. 5.3, we're looking for sand or water activities to set up to facilitate play. So you're going to include the materials in the water or in the sand so that they can begin to know how to play with it. And you're going to talk about how to scoop and how to fill things up and how it might smell. You know, if it's oatmeal, and you know, how does it smell? How does it feel? And so you're facilitating that play. 7.1, we're looking for sand or water play to be provided daily. And 7.2, we're looking for different types of activities to be offered in those areas. So if it's water play, it might be some baby dolls, or it might be some bubbles that have been added, or it might be some colored water that's been added. Floating toys might be added along with the cups. Again, just as ITERS is, it's anything that can be scooped and poured and be considered in your sand and water table. It doesn't have to be sand. So that's sand and water. Any questions? No? Okay, so nature and science. Toddlers need nature and science too, and so do infants. So at the 5 level, we're looking for outdoor experiences with nature to be provided at least 2 times per week. Infants, that would be taking them outside in a stroller and going for a walk, or it could be laying them on a blanket with some toys around them and talking about how the wind feels when it's blowing, you know, those kinds of things. Staff is pointing out natural things, maybe a bird flutters by, and so the staff says, oh, a bluebird, you know, things like that. 5.2, we're looking for some daily experiences with living plants or animals indoors. So it might be a fish tank, and you would be the one to go over and feed the fish, but you would have them gather around as you're doing it, talking about, look at how the fish opens and closes its mouth, and he's, you know, look at the bubbles his mouth creates when it opens and closes. He's gobbling up the food, those kinds of things. Plants, you could give them a little tiny, you know, Dixie cup or a little, you know, container and let them water a plant. Those kinds of things. 5.2, we're looking for some daily experience. Oops, we just did that one, sorry. 5.3, we're doing everyday events used for learning about nature and science. So an everyday event might be talking about the weather and what's happening. Maybe you're gathering, maybe you can't go outside because it's pouring rain, and so you go out and you talk about how hard it's raining and look at the amount of water. Maybe you've set out a container outside the door, if you've got a solid glass door, and you put a container out there to collect water and from the rain, and you can talk about, look how much rain we're getting, that bowl's getting full, you know, that kind of thing. Pointing out insects or birds, blowing bubbles with them, and watching how the wind makes it blow away. Watching the rain, the wind, or the snow. So having conversations around those areas. At the 7.1 level, we're looking for staff to show interest in and respect for nature. So helping them care for the pets. That's when you might let them feed the fish. And then afterwards go over and wash your hands, because that would be considered, that's something we would look for. Helping children learn how to handle objects carefully. So maybe they have a little magnet rod and some great big ball magnets, and you're talking about, you know, that not throwing them because they could break, and you're using those kinds of language with them. The children are taken outside in different kinds of weather, so they can experience the weather and feel the weather. I went to a training last summer where they showed a video of a little girl playing in the rain for the first time, experiencing rain for the first time. And she was a toddler, she probably was between a year and 2. And she wandered outside, and it was raining, and she stood there, and her eyes, the expression on her face, and it went on for several minutes. She was so ecstatic because she was feeling this rain, and she was laughing and giggling and going, oh, and it was so exciting to watch. We've lost that feeling as adults, so it's really important to take kids outside and let them experience what's happening. Even if it's hot, you know, talking about that heat and how it feels on our bodies, and what does it, you know, how do animals feel? Where do you think the birds go when it's raining? You know, having those kinds of conversations with them. And then 7.2, the materials are well organized. So all of your magnifying glasses are kept together. And when things are kept together like that, even toddlers can put things away at cleanup time because they know where it goes. There's organization. Okay, any questions? No? Okay, so nature and science for toddler requirements are that we represent nature realistically, so that maybe the insects they look like real insects, so the animals look like real animals. So you don't have a purple bear or a blue dog, like brown bear, brown bear. Obviously, cool story, kids love it, and it's a great way to teach about colors, but there are no such thing as blue dogs, and purple cats. So making sure that the things that you have in your classroom are as realistic as possible. Fruits and veggies, that they're realistic looking. And the shell, that you include things like shells, things from nature, so that they can see what things from nature look like and feel what they feel like. And then categories that we would be looking for, we'd be looking for picture books with realistic looking pictures in them. Pictures on the wall of things that represent nature, butterflies, birds, trees, those kinds of things. And toys like magnifying glasses, sound canisters that they can shake and listen to, microscopes that are easy for them. This is a great one for toddlers because it shows it's solid, it's big on the base, and it can't tip over easily. And so they can get a really good view of something that's small. And then magnets, just have to be careful that there's a lot of magnets on the market that are too small for toddlers. So, the great big plastic balls that have a magnet inside of them are good, but the smaller ones are not as good.
So real quick, just my own question, and I don't know if you said this already, but what is something that people often miss, in the nature science? Is it something that you're finding in centers have a lot of the nature science materials? Are there pieces that you find, a lot of folks don't really have the certain materials, or do you want to touch on that?
I think for any age, we find it with ITERS as well. If a teacher is really interested in science and nature themselves, they tend to have a very well-stocked center. Mm-hmm. If the teacher doesn't have that background knowledge and doesn't really know how to introduce that concept, it's typically not, a strong area. Mm-hmm. Infants and toddlers, very, very often do you see a fully stocked or even a center at all for nature and science, because it's not something they think about typically. So if the program is aware of ITERS and they have some background, they typically will have a few things and they'll get some scores. But that's one of the good things about QRIS, because we can help them learn about it. Awesome. So, yeah. Okay, so diversity. At the 5 level, diversity is talking about different races and culture, different ages. So age could be considered things like an infant to a grandparent. And if I were looking in the classroom for, do they have things that represent ages, I would be looking for photographs of, maybe a younger child and a little bit older child, or an adult sitting with them or playing with them or something like that. And then we're looking for abilities. Abilities can even be things like glasses. I never thought of myself as disabled, but I guess glasses, that does count. So, and then gender is anything like the non-typical traditional roles. Like that males can be a daddy and take care of children, or a female can be a firefighter or a police officer, those kinds of things.
I think it's an important piece to clarify when you say abilities, because I think in the first training term, I'm looking at abilities and I'm thinking of talents or what is,
Abilities are things that cause someone to not be able to function, like a paraplegic, or maybe they need a walker because they, or crutches because they've hurt themselves, and that becomes, now they have to have something else to help them function properly. Mm-hmm. So if I take my glasses off, I can see large words, and up close and far away, I can pretty much read anything, but up close, I can't read anything small. So that's why that's considered an ability. And so we're looking for, at the 5 level, many examples in all of the 3 areas, not a specific number of items at the 5.1 level, but just many examples from each of the categories. At the 5.2 level, we're looking for dolls representing at least 3 races. And then at the 7 level, we're looking for non-sexist images in pictures or books. So meaning that there's no pictures of females being a firefighter and it's all males, or all the teachers in the books are females, that kind of thing. If that's all we would see, you wouldn't get credit for that. So we're looking for at least 2 examples during our observation of those types of things. At the 7.2 level, we're looking for cultural awareness shown in a variety of activities. So maybe you have a family that is of Mexican heritage, and so you've got some things in your classroom to help that child and other children in that classroom to learn about their culture. And that you celebrate different customs or holidays with the children in the classroom, and that you serve different types of foods from different cultures to them. Any questions? Okay. There's my cute picture for questions. My little guy wondering what life is all about. So that's all I have for this training.
So maybe you can just tell a little bit about in the introduction to ITERS earlier, the introduction to ITERS that we're doing right now, and the intro to FECRS later on this evening. There's some attachments that go along with that. So the handouts we have here in the room, there's handouts that I sent out online, and the one I'm thinking of in particular is Lakeshore. So do you want to tell a little bit about what that handout is?
Right. Lakeshore has come up with, they've worked really hard with the ITERS tools to determine what materials are appropriate for all of the different categories, for diversity, for math, for books. And they looked at the age range of the requirements of that, and they put together a list of materials that they feel are appropriate and that they supply to help staff and family child care providers figure out. So you're not just online searching and does this go to this category or can it fit in this category? I don't know. They've done the hard work for us.
How nice.
I know, perfect, right?
So providers can be accessing that to figure out, and with the help of a coach, whether you're a North State coach or a coach in a different consortium, you can kind of help providers figure out on that list how to kind of beef up their areas.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it is, if they're not here today in the training, you can go to lakeshore.com, and it is one of the resources on their webpage that you can download.
Okay, what
So
about
they also have one for Head Start.
Awesome. What about the video that you showed earlier about hand washing, just in case anyone that wants to access that video, where can they find
just
it?
go to YouTube and put in ITERS hand washing. It pops up. And there is a part 1 and a part 2, and I showed part 2 today. Part 1 is about the table washing procedures. So that's another piece that's nice to watch too. It does move really quickly. I wish that I tried to slow the speed down to try to see, but then it went and dragged on so slow that it was, took forever. So it does move quickly, but at least from state to state and consortium to consortium, the procedures are the same. So that makes it nice.
Okay, well,
All right.
any other questions or final thoughts anybody has before we log off? We've got some time here. So
We're early.
if you would like a certificate of participation, you can email me at hub@first5shasta.org. Everyone on this call I know has my email address. So if you'd like a participation certificate, I can send one over to you. Just email me and let me know. That's all that I have.
That's it. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate
Thanks, everyone,
your being involved.
for joining online. They say thank you. All right, I'm going to end the meeting.